Welcome to the Rant Live. Welcome to the show, everybody. Today is Labor Day, and I am your co-host, John Furlees, and I'm here with my co-host, Evan Altman. Evan, happy Labor Day. I hope you're not working today.
I'm not. Well, other than this, right? The most important job that I have.
I think there are some Facebook commenters who would argue that this is not working at all.
Yeah, I think it's probably the opposite of work.
Yes,
most of them would believe, but yeah, I think I should take a nap. I've been to 2 concerts in the last 4 days, and I'm kind of tired. So it's
is that your max for like the month? I mean, if I did that, I don't think I could do it.
Yeah, well, I have 2 more later this month. So I'm going,
Wow.
I got 2 more in the space of 3 days coming up later. And, but those will be a little bit more low key. Like I'm in the lawn, I'll be chilling. The problem with it was that the first one we did was kind of
Nash and Young.
Yeah, no, not so much, but we'll see. Yesterday the problem was that it was supposed to rain all day, and the forecast was getting better and better. And it was like, okay, no rain in the forecast, cool. And it's an outdoor. It was like a festival kind of a thing, small festival. And there was some indoor stuff. One of the stages was indoors, but the one and we saw like a Tom Petty. They call it a dream set, but it's like a bunch of different artists from Dawes and Cage the Elephant, John Oates of Hall & Oates, cool. Right? And they're playing Tom Petty songs.
How does that play off? Is it
without weird.
Hall?
Well, it's all a mix. Well, Hall & Oates played
Did you
together
say I can't go
the night
for that?
Before. Yeah. So I wanted to hear some more stuff. I was like, oh, I want to hear Private Eyes. But no, they played a good, like an hour-long Tom Petty set. That was indoors. It was cool. It was all general admission, right? But then we want to see John Fogerty, and he was supposed to start at 8. Been like 8 to 9:30. But the skies opened up, and it poured for like 45 minutes, and so they had to stop the setup and wait on it. Thankfully, right, I had purchased ponchos ahead of time, and we were wearing Crocs, because I was like, don't wear normal shoes. And my son's like, but the weather looks really nice. I said, just bear with me. Sure enough, and it opened up, so he didn't go on until about 9. And they played an abbreviated set because Cage the Elephant was coming on after. But when you've been standing there, when you're old and you're standing and it's raining and you're just fighting through that, but it ended up being fine. And it was nice because it was a Sunday evening. And so the traffic, once we left, we didn't want to see Cage the Elephant, and a ton of people were there to see them. And so it was great because when the Fogerty show was over, it was like, boop, get out of there and done. And we were home. But, the show I went to on Thursday night was Wu-Tang Clan, Nas, and Busta Rhymes. And then that one didn't get over till about 11. And I had a bit of a longer commute home from that one, about an hour, which is not late, but, I think my ears stopped ringing sometime yesterday, so that was nice.
You're making me tired just talking about it, so maybe we should move on before I fall asleep here.
And probably talk about the Cubs at some point, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, what the heck. Right. Yeah, I mean, speaking of the Cubs, they are not good against the Cardinals at all. Let me tell you, the Cubs in the second half of the season have been really good, except against the Cardinals. Their record in the second half is 21-21, a .500 record, which for the Cubs is respectable. But they're 2-9 against the Cardinals in the second half. And so if you eliminate the Cardinals from that equation, they're 19-12 against every other team. So they're really good. The Cubs are a good team. They're just not better than the Cardinals. And that's it.
Yeah. And when you have Albert Pujols is a fossil, and yet all of a sudden he's just caught fire.
That made no sense to me. It's like, did David Ross go out there and say, pump him 2 fastballs?
That's what I'm like.
Why didn't he throw a slider? I mean, at least one.
Well, the fact that it's against a left, Hughes is a lefty who Pujols has been crushing this season
Yeah.
already, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that
Even the
alone.
announcers were talking about that.
Yeah, and it's like even the one now. I'll give Smiley credit because the pitch Pujols hit against him for a homer in the previous series,
Yeah, it
was
was
like
like
a foot
air.
above the strike zone. There's no way. No, I mean that's not a bad pitch. That's not a mistake. That's just a pitch that Pujols got a hold of. But I don't know. It did feel a little bit like he was like, "Hey, man, listen." But it's also a tie game at that point too. It's not like the Cubs were down 8. Like that's
It was
the
0-0, a pitcher's duel, and Hughes had just come into the game, and you're thinking like I'm thinking for sure we're not going to see a fastball, and the first pitch was a fastball, but it was high, and out of the zone. Pujols didn't swing at it, and then I'm thinking for sure slider, 100%, and a fastball right down the middle of the plate. I mean it was a BP fastball. It wasn't even a quality pitch.
Yeah, that's like I would be more willing to kind of fall into the conspiracy of it all had the game situation been different, right? If the Cubs were either up a lot or down a lot, but it's a curious decision in general, right? Just having a lefty going up against Pujols, going
Well, and
fastball,
particularly where Ross came out,
yeah,
and they had a meeting at the mound. He couldn't have possibly said, "Throw him 2 fastballs here."
yeah. That seems very odd, So I mean, again, was Hughes and I, admittedly, right, like when that happened, I was kind of following it, and I was there at that concert, and so I didn't
Thank God you
follow
didn't
up
have
on
to
the
see it.
post game. I mean, did he come back, and was there any commentary afterwards? Right, like, well, I don't know. Was the slider not? Did it not feel right? Was there something else going
No,
on?
he had the batter that he had just faced. He struck out on I think 3 sliders. No, I mean the slider was looking good.
Yeah, that
He had
just seems
faced
curious.
whoever he had faced right before Pujols, I believe was a right-handed hitter, and that slider was breaking down towards his feet.
Mm-hmm.
It looked good. Yeah, I mean, he got some 2 ugly swings from the batter before, and then the third pitch, I believe, was a slider that the guy just reached for and hit to Nico. It was an easy ground out. So then Ross comes out as Pujols is coming up to bat. They talk for a little while, and they're talking about how Hughes, is a left-handed pitcher, and Pujols crushes left-handed pitching, and then Ross leaves the mound, and you're thinking, okay, they've got a game plan here, and the first pitch he throws is a high fastball, and the second pitch he throws is a fastball right in the middle of the plate. I mean, it was
Why would Ross
pitch.
come out for that? You know what I mean? Like for a normal, the manager shouldn't be going out there to be talking strategy and all that. That's Hotavy's job. Like, why would? I don't know. That's just it's super weird to me.
It was weird. It was weird. So, whatever, it happened. It sucks that it's like the last at bat that Albert Pujols will ever have against the Chicago Cubs. And listen, I know there's a lot of people. I guess I'm just not a good guy or something like that, because there's a lot of people out there who are like, this is baseball history, and I want Pujols to get 700. I don't want Pujols to get 700. I want him to get 699. I don't like Albert Pujols. He has killed the Cubs his entire career. I don't have to like Albert Pujols because he has killed the Cubs his entire career. And then you just displayed it in his last at bat. No, I want him to be stuck on 699 home runs, and I want him to have to decide whether he's going to come back next year or not. So there.
Well, and we're also talking about a guy who left his wife when she had cancer. So I think there's, everybody talks about him being this great, classy dude, and maybe there's something more to that story that I know about. But boy, that certainly seemed odd, among other things. But as long as here's the thing, I don't mind him getting 700. He has slowed down slightly, so I mean he's still got to get 5 more here over the next month, which is
like it's MLB like just basically gonna just give him.
I think there's definitely going to be an effort. I think they wanted to pass Alex Rodriguez, right? Is Rodriguez at 696? Is he still right ahead of him? Is that where 697, something like that? He came up short, but they want Pujols to get to 700. I mean, as a league, not just the Cardinals, but like the league would love to see it.
Major League Baseball loves to celebrate those types of moments, right? Like they love to hoist, kind of the batters and players up on their shoulders and celebrate these what they call great moments, even though they may be players that you don't particularly care for. So, oh
Yeah,
well.
it'll definitely be something they want to try to track. So and I mean, again, when you're the Cubs, the winning and losing doesn't really matter at this point. I know there's a lot of other, even though like, again, I'm not saying this, not that it's not important to the players. I always like to make that clear. Like players are, and that's what's tough, right? Is if you effectively ask a player to kind of lay down. Now, there are times, right? If we go back to like the Barry Bonds home run chase, and I know Kerry Wood was talking about facing him, and like Wood's going like, I'm going to pitch to him. Like I'm going to give him my best. And with Wood, I mean, you're talking fastball curve, that sort of thing. But he's like, these dudes want to be, if they got a big fastball, they want to beat you with that, right? These pitchers want to beat you. They want to pitch to these guys, right? You don't necessarily want to be the one that gave up number 700, but if you're truly a competitor, you want to go out there and beat the best. Pujols isn't the best anymore, but he's sure hitting like it right now, right? And he's crushing lefties. So if you're Hughes, I mean, maybe it's a question of like, hey, kid, do you think you can beat him with the fastball? Yeah, I think I can. All right, then go do it, And so I think there's something to be said for that. If you're a competitor, right, it might be intimidating to face Nolan Ryan back in the day, and a lot of guys at a certain point might not want, like Randy Johnson, when he was going at his best. I mean, Randy Johnson at his best was, I mean, I don't know if we go top 5, but that run that he had once he figured stuff out, he was insanely good, just dominant. Yeah. So like, not, facing someone like that is different from facing someone like Maddox, even though, again, Maddox had just some incredible runs there. DeGrom now, Scherzer at times, right? Most of the time now, Verlander. And so, you flip that to some of these hitters, whether it be Trout or Ohtani or whomever. But in today's game, pitchers have a greater advantage over hitters. So if you're a pitcher, man, you want to go after these guys. And I get it. It's kind of a weird, it's an odd scenario. But if I'm a pitcher going up against Pujols the rest of the way, I'm going out there and I want to pitch to him. I don't want to walk the dude. You know what I mean? Like, all right, if you got it, if you're going to get it, I'm going to make you earn it. But yeah, we'll see.
Walking him seems a little bit of a stretch, but yeah. So
anyways, if you're a lefty throwing to him, though, he's got a good chance at taking you out.
Yeah.
Leaving the yard like he left his wife when she had cancer.
The Cubs, that's a good transition. The Cubs definitely have a lot to build on as they kind of go forward, and I think there's a lot to look forward to. But one thing that we've noticed is that the Cubs really seem to be slow on calling up some of their prospects and some of the guys that it would seem that they would call up. I mean, they brought David Bodie up the other day, which I was completely confused by. I mean,
because they don't have enough middle infielders, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah. I guess it's that because he's on the 40-man roster. But we have talked about this ad nauseum that the Cubs are going to have to address the 40-man roster situation sooner or later, and that David Bodie is not likely to be part of the Cubs' future. And there's a number of other players that are at Iowa or wherever they are that are not going to be part of the Cubs' future either. And there are a number of players such as Alexander Canario and Matt Mervis who people would love to see up in Chicago, who it doesn't feel like we're going to see. I mean, I don't know why we wouldn't see Canario, to be honest with you. He's on the 40-man roster already, so there's really no excuse to see him. I understand the Cubs have a lot of outfielders, but still, you could work him in there somehow. And Matt Mervis, I mean, here's a guy, Matt Mervis, just an interesting guy, right? I mean, he was an undrafted free agent signing in June of 2020, largely undrafted because it was only a 5-round draft due to COVID. He signed with the Cubs a minor league deal and really hasn't put up great stats until this year.
Well, he only had the one season. I mean,
yeah.
There wasn't a minor league season in 2020.
He wasn't like a super stud at Duke, which is where he went to school. But this year he's just crushing. I mean, at Duke he never had more than 6 home runs. This year,
but part of that was because he was also a pitcher and he didn't hit very much. He had fewer at bats because he was a pitcher.
437 at bats, 30 home runs, 76 runs, 106 RBI. His average is 314. He's got an on base percentage of 376 and a slugging of 613, which is just ridiculous. And he only has 93 strikeouts over 437 at bats, which is really impressive. Now, I compared that to Chris Bryant in 2014, and these numbers are gaudy. I mean, he had 492 at bats, so he had 64 more, or not 64, 54 more at bats at the time. 118 runs to 76, 43 home runs to 30, 110 RBI, so not nearly as many RBI. And then his slash line was 325, 438, 661. Whew. But he had 162 strikeouts, and that was something that continued to haunt Bryant into the major leagues and still does to this day. And 86 walks. So that was a home run every 11.4 at-bats for Bryant and a home run every 14.6 at-bats for Matt Mervis. The guy is tearing it up, and it's kind of crazy, I think. I mean, what do you think the reason is for the Cubs not bringing him up to Chicago?
I mean, I know
it's a struggle to come up with a reason.
Yeah, I mean, I get you're well the 40 man, and when you make a decision on that, right? You've got Bodie, Schwindel, Ortega. I mean, we could go through any number. Farrell. We go. You know, you don't normally swap out a pitcher for a position player, but there are 3 position players, and okay, let's look at this. I mean, let's look at this very pragmatically. Okay, the Cubs need a first baseman. Schwindel clearly was not the answer. Alfonso Rivas has not appeared to be the answer, and Alfonso. The other thing is the Cubs need left-handed hitting, specifically left-handed power. They need power in general. Well, yeah, you got a guy slugging over 600, and to me, when you look at Mervis, you know what else has happened? His strikeout rate has dropped at each level. He's striking out less in Iowa than he did at Tennessee, than he did at South Bend. He's 25 years old, right? College hitter, as you mentioned, played both ways. Part of the reason, he was also a righty pitcher who threw 95 plus. Now, part of that means fewer reps at first, fewer at-bats in general, fewer against left-handed pitchers. Now, it should be noted, 2 of his last 3 homers came against left-handed pitchers in Columbus, and both of them were bombs. This is not a dude who hits wall scrapers, right? I mean, he put it out. Whatever that building is, like an apartment or a party deck thing, yeah. Whatever that is. He hit one off the roof. Like an
apartment building.
Yeah. Then put one over it. Then hit the scoreboard. I mean, his hitting streak ended last night, the second half of a doubleheader, but he had like a 13-game hit streak. And again, I will note that if you look at his numbers pre-August 20th and post, they're going to look a lot better post 8/20, which is when my son and I wore our Mash Mervis T-shirts to the game here in Indianapolis. I'm not saying
coincidence,
correlation, causation. Who's to say? But he is hitting really like
facts are facts.
Yeah, it's not just looking at it saying, "Hey, this guy hits well. The Cubs should pull him up." It's going like, "Listen, he's at an old enough. You're not looking at it saying there's some 20-year-old who broke out of nowhere." Right. The Cubs made some specific moves with his swing to kind of help improve a few things to bring this out of him. He plays first base. He's a left-handed hitter. It fits all these things, and maybe we've talked about this. I mean, he's going to be assigned to the Arizona Fall League. Hell, maybe they just want to let him pitch again and the AFL, and then they can make him a 2-way player again. I don't think that's really the case. I think they do want him to get
no sense.
Yeah, more reps at first. It's a little bit weird still to have a guy who's, again, the best offensive season in the system since Chris Bryant in 2014, to have him get more work in the AFL, but he has DH some. I assume that they'll be wanting him to work explicitly at first base to get more plate appearances against left-handed pitchers and just to kind of prove some of those things. But I mean, what does he got to do? Like again, I get the 40-man thing, but are you telling me that Frank Schwindel and Rafael Ortega and others are more deserving of a 40-man roster spot right now than Matt Mervis is.
That is what they're telling you, yes.
Right.
That's exactly
it very
what they're
much
saying.
is, as a matter of fact. Or Rivas for that matter. Although I don't want to part with Alfonso Rivas just yet. But here's the problem with Rivas, right? Is he can pick it pretty well over first base, but the dude has no power.
Yeah.
There's no power there whatsoever. I mean, you're talking like on par with Nick Madrigal. And I'm not joking. Like his ISO, unless it's taken a jump lately over his last season, 2 seasons, his ISO is right on par with Nick Madrigal's. And that's not where you cannot have a first baseman who, I'm not saying doesn't hit for a lot of power. I'm saying hits for no power.
Your first baseman has to be hitting 20 home runs.
Yeah, not 2.
No.
And that's where, and if you've got PJ Higgins on the roster, right? You've got Franmil Reyes. I'd love to see Mervis come up. So if you are going to have, and the thing is, Mervis bats left-handed, so he's not going to platoon with Rivas, but give me like a Mervis Higgins kind of first base platoon with a Mervis Reyes DH platoon. And now all of a sudden, and that's the thing, is Mervis is balancing out that power with a little bit more contact. The Cubs are trying to go that route. It just makes a ton of sense. And that's where I'm like, this is a dude, wouldn't you want to get this look at him? What is the AFL going to do for him? I know there's some things they maybe want to try to work on, but of all the players they've got out there, right? Because that's the thing with Canario, he struggled pretty significantly to make those adjustments right now at AAA. He's still, and that doesn't mean you can't call him up, give him a little bit of a cup of coffee. But again, when you look at Mervis should be the player of the year for the team by the time it's all said and done. He was a player of the month for August. He's hit 3 home runs already in September and is getting better, right? I mean, it's him or Pete Crow Armstrong, and then a very wide gap before maybe. And that's saying something because Canario's got 30 homers. Canario got to 30 before Mash did, making him the first player since Bryant to do it. But clearly the overall numbers favor Mervis and the fact that he's right on the precipice. But, I think there's a few other moves. And that's what I wrote a little something today about that. And it's a bold prediction, but I think he could be the rookie of the year next year. I really think that he could continue. He's a dude whose game I think fits well. And will continue to play out really well. Although, I look at that too, but I see Pete Crow Armstrong making his way up by next year. I see Brennan Davis being with the club next year. And, if those are 2 dudes, that's a center fielder and a left fielder. You've already got Seiya Suzuki. I think Ian Happ's time in Chicago is most definitely still limited, despite the fact that they did not trade him. I think that's a dude we might maybe we see on the move, here this offseason as a result. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot to be excited about for next season. And I mean, I think some of the things that we thought were going to happen, particularly Davis coming up this season, didn't happen. I think that we kind of took the position all along that we didn't know if we'd see Davis. And a lot of people were pounding on the table saying, he should be up right away. And why are they doing Chris Bryant service time manipulation, all this other stuff. And I think our position had been the entire time that, it was like he's still got some work to do. He hadn't played at Iowa at all and still needed to kind of prove himself there. And as he was trying to do that, he got injured. And so it was a moot point anyways. But I really think next season is the season where you're going to see a lot of exciting things happen. Going to be very, very much like 2015. You're probably going to start the season with some guys at Iowa that we think should be in Chicago. And I don't think that'll be a service time manipulation thing, but it'll just be kind of the way that it works. I mean, maybe Davis is down, maybe he's up, Mervis, Canario. There's going to be some interesting things going on. And you mentioned Hap. Yeah, I mean, if they're going to bring Canario up, I mean, just one more guy, right? And you don't really have room for Hap anymore. But the thing is that Hap is that left-handed bat, and so you hate to lose the left-handed, power bat too. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of how they manage him and how they manage that extra outfielder. Whether I don't know if they DH Hap. I mean, I guess they could, but
yeah. But if you bring Reyes back, right? And you've got Mervis there. There's very little, and Hap's power has not really come along as much as I think we had expected it to early. And some of that's right. He is hitting for better average. He is playing better left field defense. There are things that help to make up for that a little bit, but as you sit there and look at it, you go, well, okay, out of their corner spots, let's and really, right, Chris Morel has been playing a lot more third base, but let's say Patrick Wisdom is at third. But Suzuki has shown some pop, but in general, if you look at him versus traditional right fielder, less power. Now, could that change? Absolutely. I mean, we saw Shohei Ohtani have to adjust. We've seen some of that, but if you look at their corners, and we mentioned Rivas, and you can split Higgins over there too. But if you look Rivas, Higgins, you look Wisdom, Morel, and then you have Suzuki and Hap at those 4 corner spots. The only one of those players with above average power is Patrick Wisdom, right? The rest of them have average to below average power. Again, they make up for it with other things, but the Cubs could very conceivably upgrade 2 of those positions this offseason in the power department, right? Like internally, without having to make much of a move for it. They could also upgrade power at the middle infield, right? If they go after one of the big shortstops, though, I still feel if they do that, that person needs to be moved to either second or third because they're not playing better than Nico Horner. You're not going to go sign a better defensive shortstop than Nico Horner at this point, unless like maybe Dansby Swanson, but I don't think he's the one that they'll target.
A lot more expensive than Nico Horner is.
Well, yeah, but I'd rather see one of those guys move over to third, right? And now you've got a more balance. If they're trying to balance,
you mentioned Morel at third base, and I got to tell you,
I don't like
his double, triple pump thing that he does.
Yeah,
I don't understand. He's not an accurate thrower from third base. I know he's played third, which is crazy. He is not a good third baseman. He's just not. And I doubt. Listen, Suzuki obviously isn't going anywhere in the outfield, but dude, I've never seen more confusion in the outfield in my life than I have from the Cubs this season, particularly when Suzuki's involved. I mean, there's so many times where it just seems like there's miscommunication between him and the center fielder. And I don't know if it's a Rafael Ortega thing or what, but it seems like there's all these near collisions in the outfield that just it's unnecessary. And like it just happened the other day, as a matter of fact, where Suzuki's pulling up at the last second. And I just hopefully they can work that out. But Morel at third base makes me uneasy.
So just give me Pete Crow Armstrong at center field immediately, and then we can eliminate that. Yeah.
Everybody else, okay. Right field and left field, you guys just stay there.
Yeah, just if it's not hit directly to you, don't worry about it. Pete will go get it. Done.
Yeah,
or
towards the line.
Yeah,
don't touch it.
That's fine. But I mean, and again but that's where I go with it too. Is will it take him continuing on this path? Yeah, I mean, he should start the season next year at Double-A. At which point, he's one call away from Chicago. And I'm not talking Iowa being that call. I'm saying he could move from Double-A if he shows that he can hit that level. We've seen that happen before.
With Morel, right?
Yeah. And maybe he does get some time at Triple-A. But the thing is, and I keep saying this, like his defense is top-level elite MLB quality now, right? That's not the development thing at all. And the same thing that makes him so good, we've mentioned this before, right? Whether you want to call it kinesthetic awareness, that's one of the things that he patterns it, or you could call it proprioception. His ability to move his body through space, to adapt physically is, and we're talking among elite athletes, he is elite at that level. And I think that's going to help him to continue to adjust at the plate. And we've seen him make those adjustments at South Bend. But there again, that's kind of that happening. Once PCA comes up, he's there. Like that's your center fielder. Done. Move on.
And center field in Chicago is not nearly as challenging. It's not a big center field.
Yeah, that's how Dexter Fowler got so good there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a guy like PCA, he's going to be, he'll go glove every single year in Chicago, and so that'll be interesting. It's not a place like like Colorado where you could run for a mile and still not be.
Out of the Colorado and Houston, right? Those are the places that Fowler had been playing, and these massive center field areas, and then he gets to Chicago and like, oh wait, you mean I can play a little shallower here, and still get Jim Edmonds was playing like 5 feet back of second base when he played there, and you could still cover. Hell, Andrew Jones would have probably played in the infield grass if he had played at Wrigley. He could have played that shallow. But there's so many things that they could make some of these moves internally. I mean, they're going to have to. I think they're going to have to swing a trade with some of these prospects, because if you look at all those outfielders, even assuming, and I think, again, I think Crow Armstrong is the surest bet of them because of that singular tool that he has that's going to enable him to play, Billy Hamilton style, right? Hamilton doesn't have to hit, but the speed and the defense have kept him in the league forever. But if you look at that and then go to, again, it's Pete Crow Armstrong, it's Brennan Davis, it's Kevin Alcantara. Those are their top three. We've got Suzuki out there, and then you've got, well, what about Owen Casey coming up? What about, there's any number of other outfielders they've got. And when we talk about Happ, part of that comes down to, this is part of what I was mentioning as well, or what I recently wrote about in my little predictions, is that he won't be extended, not because he's not an excellent ball player. I mean, he was an all-star, and somebody was kind of arguing with me about this. I said, but first of all, he doesn't have that singular defining tool, right? And the guy was like, well, hitting for average is a tool. Like, yeah, okay. That's great. You can bat 275, 280. That's really good, especially in today's game. But that's not a carrying tool. Batting 315 in today's game is a carrying tool. Hitting for a bunch of power, having gold glove level defense, having elite speed. Those are all loud tools that can allow you to establish value better. But when you're looking at a team that's got a bunch of outfielders coming up, that decreases Happ's residual value moving forward. Like, okay, if we sign you to a long-term deal, 5-6 years, now we've got two long-term. We have one outfield spot that's remaining. And so we need to know that and I'm telling you this, I think Pete Crow Armstrong is a dude who could be 4 to 5 WAR every year moving forward. I think Brennan Davis can be a more productive hitter than Ian Happ. And so right there, what is Happ's value? Unless he is willing to take a really steep discount to stick around in Chicago, I just don't think the Cubs and Ian Happ can come to an agreement on the terms that would keep him in there, that would make sense for him. I think he'd be able to go get a lot more money somewhere else for a team that needs that kind of a player. I just don't see the Cubs making that work. And they need those spots desperately, dude. And I mean, hell, they're giving all this run to Rafael Ortega, who runs into an out every now and again. Every time I talk shit about him, he ends up like hitting a home run the next day. So we'll see.
Talk more about him, but yeah, he's terrible. Yeah, and that just it feels like maybe the Cubs are keeping some of these guys down in the minors just so, as you mentioned, they're going to need to trade some of the guys away, and maybe they see value in them, kind of being minor leaguers and not tempting fate, so to speak, to see kind of you have a bad couple weeks or a month in the majors, and then suddenly their trade value goes down a little. I have no idea. I'm just spitballing here. But at the end of the day, I think you're right. I think they have to trade some of these prospects probably in the off season, I would say.
Yeah.
If they can get a power arm,
Shane
for
Bieber,
some of these prospects, yeah, that'd be great. You know what I mean? They've got so many guys that they can trade, a base that they can trade from, and so many outfielders. And if they're able to trade some of these position players for a pitcher, that'd be great. That'd be really good. And then maybe get a prospect or two back as well with some upside. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how it all plays out. I think the offseason, this is probably going to be the most interesting offseason for the Cubs in years. I mean, last season was, obviously the lockout was kind of stopped everything in its tracks, and that was a bummer for us too, because our website did literally no traffic whatsoever. Yeah. You're like, what should we write about today?
What's the latest rumor? Well, and it was nice because at least they boosted us into it with the last second Marcus Stroman signing, right? And then there was the whole Seiya Suzuki thing. But I mean, in between, when they can't talk about anything, when they can't make any moves, they couldn't do any of that stuff.
Yeah, there was nothing going.
There was nothing there. But here's
hard.
And I know, like, it's funny because there's this, you see, or I do at least, there's trends in kind of the Cubs fandom and the consumption of news, like, a decade ago when I got started writing about this team, for public consumption, right? It was, hey, they're gonna suck, right? They're trying to suck, they're trying to rebuild, and then you had a whole bunch of people who didn't believe it, didn't buy it. Theo Epstein's a liar. Tom Ricketts is a liar. They're not trying to win. This sucks. They don't know what they're doing. And then, that obviously changed dramatically within the next 2 years, right? Because 2012, 2013, everybody's like, Theo Epstein's a liar. He sucks. He's stupid. To oh my God, he's a genius. He's the best person ever. To then it became like, okay, this team is, what the hell are they doing? Why aren't they spending? They're not going to spend. And you've always had, and then there's always a flip side to all those things, right? There were people who said, this is stupid. Why are they doing this? And then the other half of the people were like, no, this makes total sense. Then it flipped to why aren't they spending money? And then you had a lot of people they are spending money. Look at their payroll. It's like, well, you got to understand how that expenditure works. Now we've gotten back to where there's a lot of people saying, hey, look, they've actually established a pretty nice basis from which they could spend. And then there's a bunch of people saying, no, Tom Ricketts will never, ever spend money again. He doesn't care. He got his World Series. They'll never increase payroll. And again, I'm not trying to let him off the hook for things that have happened. I'm not trying to let anybody off the hook. I feel like, and this is what's difficult to have a conversation with somebody, because you run into the pitfall of being like, do you know who I am? If I'm talking to somebody, and I'm not trying to be like, I am awesome, believe me, but it's more like, I run an entire website and have an entire video / podcast on which we discuss all these topics multiple times a week, right? I've got a 10-year backlog of covering the team. I've hit on all these topics. So if I'm addressing this one topic a day,
your foundation of knowledge is much greater than pretty much everybody else.
Well, not only that, but it's I've written about this. They'll argue with me about it. But what about? I'm like, here are 15 links or whatever that I've already covered that in depth. I'm on this one topic now. But anyway, that brings me around to, when you look at it, the projection right now is the Cubs should be around $110 million payroll, with money falling off. That's estimated ARB raises. That's, raises for non-ARB players, somewhere in there, 110 to 115 million.
That's with the players they have now.
Right. Just before they would go out and sign anybody. Yeah. And so that's the luxury tax threshold, that's really low. The luxury tax threshold for next year is $233 million, right? They don't even have to get to, they should be at $200 million every year. I mean, they should be past $200 million, right? But let's just say they were at $150 this year. That's where they're at right now. I think the estimate, they go to $175. They could spend $65 to $70 million or $50 to $55 to $75 million in the offseason, which is a lot.
Let's be clear. So let's be clear that when you say these numbers, just so everybody understands, $65 to $70 million, that's a year. And so when you go and sign somebody to a $150 million contract, that's not all in 1 year. That's spread out over multiple years. And so typically your biggest signing, the biggest signing the Cubs could probably make would be $40 million salary per year.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but that would be DeGrom, basically.
Yeah.
And so beyond a Jacob DeGrom, anybody under, every other player is going to come in under that number. And so 65 to 70 million, that's 2 or 3 superstars.
Yeah. They could easily go out, right? Add those players. And we're talking, I'm saying still only be at $175 to $180 million payroll. We're talking about still being
under the
$50 to $60 million. $50 to 60 under. And then you have Jason Hayward falling off after next year, and Kyle Hendricks falling off after next year, possibly Ian Happ falling off after next year. So right there is another $50 or $60 million that clears up. They could go and make a huge splash without stressing the books. Then they go and make another huge splash the following week. They could, right? I'm not saying they will, but they could do that.
They could do it all next year. They could do it all next year and just absorb kind of what was happening, knowing that those salaries are going to drop off, right?
And they can do it in a very targeted manner. You go get go get DeGrom, whatever, or go get a top line pitcher and go get one of those shortstops. You get those two. And again, everybody thinks when I talk about stuff like this, well, one player won't do it. Okay, I'm not saying that one player or those two players are who does it. Nobody's saying that. But if you improve with those, if you get an ace, and there's another thing I wrote about is I think Justin Steele basically elevates himself to the number 2. I would trust Justin Steele over. Yeah, he probably is. He's number 1 if they don't sign somebody else, I think. But you go get an ace, and then you give me that ace, and then Steele and Stroman, right? And then do whatever you want. I still think Keegan Thompson probably profiles better as more of that middle relief type of guy. That's my thought. But you get that top line shortstop. You move him to either second or third. I'd kind of actually like to see him at third with the way Madrigal's hitting and reaching base right now. If he can continue that, which is what we've kind of expected, and then you get Brennan Davis to come up, right, and then eventually Pete Crow Armstrong. But that really profiles again that we've kind of followed this timeline. Getting a couple of those top guys, that all of a sudden turns next season into your 2015 again, even if it's just one, right? And so that's not one player making the fix. It's that player then allowing other things to fall into place with who they then promote, right? Whether that's Mervis at first base, then you figure out, okay, is Brendan Davis the real deal? And if so, again, that allows you then to figure out, you got another year to figure, okay, is Pete Crow Armstrong the real deal? Cool. Now we start moving him up, and then as we saw, 15, the young guys started to come up, and then they were able to start bringing them in there and fill those gaps. And then you see again, now what do we need? Great, now we can go get that. So catcher is still an issue. Does Contreras? I think I did those numbers without Contreras being there. I think he could, but I think he could take the qualifying offer, or I think he could work out a kind of a shorter deal based off of the qualifying offer. That's entirely possible.
The Cubs are actually pretty strong in their system at the catcher position, though.
Yeah.
You've got Amaya, who could be up next year.
If he does well in the Arizona Fall League, where he'll be catching, right? He's only been DHing so far because of the elbow surgery. But if he continues to hit and reach base really well, and the catching is always the defense, and the game calling has been his carrying tool. It's kind of the opposite of Contreras, right? And you've got Yan Gomes there for another year, and PJ Higgins has been okay. I mean, I'm not saying like, get rid of Wilson, he sucks, but if I'm looking at it from the Cubs' perspective and saying we've got this dude who's, again, the Father Time is maybe catching up with him a little bit. It's going to cost X amount to keep him, even for a shorter period of time.
I mean, you definitely
we've got these other guys
qualifying offer to him, which in turn could make it so that nobody signs him, right? I mean, so that's going to happen, right?
Or at least he doesn't get the offer. I think somebody will sign him for it. I don't know if he'll get he certainly won't get as much as what he would get if he were not attached to it, right? If he had been traded and could hit the free agent market unencumbered by that QO. But yeah, I think they absolutely make it, which then if he turns it down and offers and goes to sign elsewhere, that compensatory pick might allow them then to pursue someone like a Carlos Rodon or another pitcher of that ilk, right, who has a qualifying offer, because then they don't mind as much losing the draft pick because they're getting back another one for losing a QO player of their own. Yeah. So it strategically, it makes a lot of sense to them. And if he does, I mean, hell, if he signs for whatever it is, $20 million for a year, and he plays under the QO, great. I mean, it's a short-term deal. It's not anything that drags them down. They could easily stick with that, and then they see what happens. So I think there's a lot of different ways they could go with that. I know I had written that I feel like it makes an extension more likely for him, and I still believe that, only because it reduces his overall value. And the ankle injury has slowed him down here in the second half. So we could look at that. But I think while that is not tied to his hamstring issues that he's had in the past, you do have to keep looking at it and say, man, the second halves, he's had issues several seasons in the second half just due to durability for one reason or another. Again, I don't want to slap that injury. You could say injury prone or whatever. I prefer to just look at it as bad luck. Although the 1 year was a result of a lack of conditioning, and he admitted to that, and that was kind of tough.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's dude for a catcher, and if he's got a DH a lot, and you've got Reyes, you've got Mervis, you got some other guys there. His value, man, it is not nearly as great in my eyes as what it appears he may be seeking in a free agent contract. So he may be let go or allowed to go see how green the grass is on the other side of the fence. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, just from a sentimental perspective, I think people want to keep him around, but you've got some prospects. I mean, Moises Ballesteros, sorry, who is an 18-year-old catcher at Myrtle Beach right now,
Mm-hmm.
who is looking really good. Ethan Hearn, I think, is he also with the Pelicans? Yeah, catcher with the Pelicans, a little older.
I think so. Yeah, Bryce Wyndham.
Not doing as well. Yeah, Bryce Wyndham. I mean, they've got these guys who
Casey Opitz.
they're not like on the radar quite yet. Like they're on our radar, right? But I don't think they're on like everybody else's radar. And I think that they're just a step away from being there. So I think the catching situation in Chicago looks a lot better than I think most people are going to give it credit for right now.
Yeah.
But
that's where the front office looks at that, and again, it's similar to what I said with Hap, right? And it's not necessarily that like, hey, we believe one or two of these guys are going to come up immediately and replace Contreras, but when you are weighing anything beyond a year, or especially if we're going 2 and 3 years down the road, like that incremental value from that player, and you look at the age, and I continue to bring this up, but the athleticism with which Wilson Contreras plays and that he relies on to make him a solid catcher, that does not get better from this point forward. And so they're going to have to weigh the potential for diminishing returns against being able to call up a couple guys who are going to make a fraction, combined. You could call up 2 of these guys between Amaya and someone else. I mean, hell, Amaya and Higgins, right? That combination right there will make 1/10 of what Contreras is seeking. And they have to look at it and say, well, if we're able to upgrade elsewhere
right now, even, right?
Yeah. I mean, it'll be,
and so 10 million.
Yeah. I mean, you figure he'll be at like, so if they're each making $750,000, there's 1.5. If he wants 20, and so yes, will the production be less? Yeah. But at how much less cost that you could then put into other areas, and assuming his production continues to decrease and the production of those young players continues to increase. And if we look at the defense, that's one of the things that's been really tough for a staff that pitches to a lot of contact, gets a lot of ground balls. Do you need some more game calling types and some guys, even if we're talking about robo umps, there's more to it than just framing. I don't know. I'm speaking more from that front office perspective. I'm not saying this is what I want to have happen and I want him gone, because I'm still, as you said, sentimentally, emotionally, from the leadership perspective, I think those things all have to factor. But I mean, we've seen some of the things that Jed Hoyer, some of the moves he's made, the hard moves that he's, sent guys away, and I could see Contreras being a part of that because of how he's viewed moving forward. And if I really break it down and remove the emotional quotient from it, it's hard for me to find a lot of fault with the idea that they could kind of finagle themselves into a really good spot, without having. I mean, how's Yasmani Grandal working out for the White Sox? Right, they threw a bunch of money there. I mean, I know Real Muto's been fine, but what have the Phillies done the last few years?
Yeah, you don't get a lot from 30-plus-year-old catchers. That's just what it comes down to, typically.
Yeah, I mean, Yachty, but that's a but just don't all this recent stuff, man. If Contreras ends up in St. Louis, like I say, all this like anything but that. Just don't. I do not want to see like that would be awful to see him in St. Louis.
if
Ugh.
Contreras ends up in St. Louis, like Yachty's not going away. I mean, I know he says he's retiring. So let's say they sign Contreras in the offseason. Either Yachty signs a cheap 1-year contract and sticks around to work with Wilson, or he stays on the coaching staff or something like that. But he's not going to go away, I don't think. I mean, he wouldn't want to go away, right? Why would?
Yeah.
Why
Well,
would
and it's funny because those fans, those St. Louis fans, like feel
God.
like they could their culture and they're like we could make him better, and it's just such a weird. There's such a funny superiority complex that they've got over those things and the classy baseball. But whatever happens, I want Contreras to go to San Diego, go to Seattle, somewhere far, far away that the Cubs don't have to see you very often.
Florida, that'd be good.
Yeah, hey, I'll take that. But yeah, I don't want to say.
Dodgers?
Oh, that would suck though. I hate the Dodgers.
But they seem to sign every big player.
Yeah, that's true. They can go out and make it happen. I don't believe from an actual competitive standpoint, particularly if we're looking at kind of next year sort of being a real reemergence or whatever we want to call it for the Cubs these next 2 years, really, I think will show. I don't think losing Contreras significantly impacts that timeline, if at all.
Yeah,
and I think it would be nice.
I agree.
It'd be nice to have him, but yeah, from a performance perspective, I don't know that there's a big difference there. And I'm probably going to get strung up for that one. But I know a lot of people will be pissed off about it, but it's like, I don't know, man.
Well, fortunately, fewer people listen to the podcast than read the website, so you got that going for you.
Oh, there we go. Well, I should put it out. I'll just quote myself and put that out there.
You could write about it.
But I think I have. Like, I think I've kind of put that out there. So but like at this point, it's weird when you're sitting there talking about like his leadership qualities. I think are probably more important than his actual production. Not more important, but if I were weighing those things, like that's I think what's more helpful to overall team development, chemistry, and things like that. But
yeah,
at the same time, I've gotten to that point, and I I'm there on Hap as well. He's a very good player. Talk about Hap now. He's a player who does a lot of different things well, but doesn't do any one thing so well that you can't easily replace a lot of that, right? I mean, if you were to say right now, starting from today, over the next 5 years, would you rather have Ian Happ or Brennan Davis? And I would suspect most people would say Brennan Davis, but
it's hard. I would say Ian Happ personally, and the reason I would say Ian Happ is because I've seen Ian Happ do it at the major league level. And so I'd always err towards somebody who's been at the major league level and proved it there than somebody who's just a prospect. But that's just me.
Right, and that's. But I'm not saying they need to move on from him. But when I look at there's nothing that Happ does that if you look at what Brennan Davis should do, or what it looks like he's capable of doing, there's really nothing in Happ's game that you're like, oh yeah, man, Happ's a Gold Glove defender. I mean, he's gotten better out there, but that's not it. It's not. And he's fast.
The one thing about Ian Happ that has been good is that he's stayed healthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's and you've seen Brendan Davis have the back issue, and so and you get these guys who come up.
Where do these people come up with this? Anyway, I'm sorry.
So
one consistent year. He's had a lot of good years. He's been an above average offensive producer every single season. But continue. I'm sorry.
So yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. I see what you're saying, but I still think there's a lot to like about Happ. I think what I'm trying to say is we shouldn't sell Happ short. I think he's going to go. I think he's going to be a really solid major league player. I think he can continue to be an all-star. But to your point, he just doesn't have that one thing that really makes him stand out. He's a good all-around player. I would say if there was one thing that made him stand out, it's the fact that he's a switch hitter.
Yeah.
I think that's his most valuable asset. And so that to me is that one thing. But short of that, at the end of the day, he's he's a guy that the Cubs are going to eventually move on from because they've got so much talent in the outfield. It's just something that's going to end up happening. So
Yeah.
it is what it is. The Cubs, the schedule gets a lot easier in September, thank goodness, because the Cubs, there was a kind of a rough stretch there that we were really concerned about, actually. And the Cubs didn't do nearly as poorly on the stretch as we thought they would do. They did lose what, 4 of the series? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They lost 5 of the series. They played the Brewers twice. They played the Cardinals twice, and they played the Blue Jays once. And they managed to win one of those series. So we were a little concerned. But hey, they didn't. They only got swept in one series, and that was against the Cardinals. And otherwise, they've had, let's see, 1, 2. I'm going to count 4, 5, 6. They won six of the.
And for the most part, they look competitive. Until going into St. Louis and just getting waxed. And then I was like, man, Saturday was like, all right, cool. Hey, 3-0 lead right out of the gate. They're hitting Waino. This is awesome. And then they give up 8 unanswered runs. And it was like, so much for that. And then, obviously with yesterday getting shut out, and giving up they got shut out twice. Right. And so they only scored in 2 separate innings. They had 3 runs in the first inning on Saturday, and then what was like the 4th or 5th inning, I think whatever it was, they scored another run. So there were only 2 innings out of 3 games which they scored a run.
Yeah, but they went 6-11 against. We knew it was going to be a tough stretch, and listen, it could have been a lot worse than that. So 6-11 didn't feel bad, and to your point, they were competitive in a lot of the games. I mean, the games against the Blue Jays, they could have won all 3 of those games. And the games that they lost to the Brewers, a couple of them were very close. I think 1 or 2 of them were extra inning games. And so, all in all, not a bad outcome. And then now they're going and they play the Reds, the Giants, the Mets, the Rockies, the Marlins, the Pirates, the Phillies, and the Reds. So it should be a lot easier. It'll be interesting to see how they finish this out. They've got a 6-game homestand coming up right now against the Reds and the Giants. And then they go and they play the Mets, and the Mets are still playing well. They haven't choked yet, which is kind of surprising.
Yeah. We'll see.
It's 3 in New York, and so it'll be interesting. So just circling up, we've got looks like there's a day game on Thursday, a day game on Friday, but that's a 3 p.m. Central day game. So it's possible we could sneak a show in before that day game. I don't know what your schedule looks like, so we'll have to figure that out, but possible.
Yeah, I got to look at it. So, I got to remember. I got some stuff coming up. It's a short week, which is nice, but meetings and whatnot. We'll figure some things out. I blocked the moron that said, Cubs are trash, always have been, and always will be. That's very nice, Kenny Thomas. If anybody would like to reply to Kenny Thomas, that would be fine. That's one, the bullpen's horrible. That's the point. That's folks are commenting. They're not trying to win this year. So the bullpen's bad.
But seriously, I mean, if the Cubs wouldn't have traded away 4 of their best relievers, I mean they'd be good.
It's a different story. But we kept
500,
and this is what we've continued to say. There were some bad stretches that they had, and even during their worst stretches, it was the one streak that ended like when the Cardinals swept them pretty badly. There were some times where they were just playing bad baseball, and that has happened. Honestly, hell, look at the Yankees. The Yankees fans right now are freaking out about that. But there were a lot of times where it's like the Cubs were losing these 1-run games and extra inning games, and that's where we talked about having one more bat or one more starting pitcher, right? Not that alone makes them all of a sudden a good team. But
everyone, they're pretty healthy. I mean, Hendricks isn't there, but Miley's pitching tonight. And so, he's coming back. And so
didn't they just move him to the 60-day?
Miley?
Did he come on? Yeah. He can't pitch tonight. They're not playing tonight. They're not
Starting
playing today.
fishing tomorrow night. Whatever. You know what I mean.
But then they didn't move him to the 60-day. What's going on here?
No.
Well, I guess
think they may have moved him to the 60-day, but that was
But then,
right,
but that's retroactive because he's been on there, so they can pull it. But they're going to have to then. Who's coming off the 40-man? They're going to have to make another move. Congratulations, you're back up. Well, that lasted a couple days. See you later.
You've just been DFA'd. Okay, so all right, so yeah, the game's tomorrow. Sorry, I was getting confused. This Labor Day thing has me all kind of confused. But anyways, that's the show for today, and we'll try to circle back with you guys come Friday, and hopefully we do. And if we do, then we'll see you then.
Cool. Sounds good.
All right, cool.
See ya.